Hey there, it's Andrea, and welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast. Today, I am so thrilled to have with me friend and colleague Jennifer Romanowicz. Jen is the owner and director of Fancy Pants Method LLC, a boutique leadership coaching and consulting firm that specializes in team effectiveness strategies and stress-free leadership that packs a punch. In addition to being an ICF professional certified coach with multiple advanced trainings, Jen is also a doctor of physical therapy, an MBA, and a seasoned military spouse. Jen, it is great to have you on the Voice of Influence podcast.
It's so great to be here. It's so great to see you again. It's been a
Uh,
hot minute.
it has been a hot minute. We were just talking about launching children into the world. And I was saying, I think I think some women get a little annoyed when you ask them questions that you wouldn't ask a man. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. I definitely do.
And I and so on the podcast, sometimes I'm like, "Ooh, when should I ask what kind of a question?" and that sort of thing. But I have to say, I really appreciate the way that you and your husband have framed sending your children after they graduate and sending them out into the world. And so I wonder if you would be willing to share that. And it is something that you both do. So it's
Yeah,
not just a mother thing.
it's not. And I mean, I'll say this even before we start. I know that I work with a lot of women leaders and a lot of, the difference between the Gen X leader and the Gen Z leader is very significant. And I think even overall, women and men are different. Every individual is different. It doesn't mean that a man won't respond the same way that a woman will, but I think there's something to be said for just noticing that there's a difference, that women might respond differently when their kids leave the nest or whatever. But it's funny when we were just kind of catching up a bit, and I mentioned for our family, we have a pretty integrated look at how business and life happen together. We kind of imparted that to our kids too. We're a Coast Guard family. We had a lot of times where we called it circle up the wagons, right? Pick up who you are and move to a brand new place where nobody knows you. And when my kids left for college, we had the idea of the empty nester that came to us. Oh, you're empty nesting, you're empty nesting. And it was like almost like forced on us that, we should be sad. We should, what are we going to do? How are we going to figure this out? And we decided that we were going to identify as bird launchers. So it just felt much more natural. Our kids, their experience of it was, the same thing that we sort of imparted to them all along in all of our moves. We had said to them each time, like, listen, yes, it's going to be sad that we're going to miss, the people that we love here. It doesn't mean that they're going to be out of our lives, but they're not going to be every day all the time the way they have been. But you get to be whoever you want at the next place that you land. And literally, if you like what you're doing here, bring it with you. And if you don't, then pick something else. And the funniest story of that, my son, we left from Washington, D.C. to Washington State, had a long trip in between, stopped at all these places. It was very hustle and bustle, very stressful actually overall for me, planning all these things on the fly, on the way from Washington to Washington. And we got there and immediately, my kids are big soccer players, signed my kids up for soccer practice or soccer tryouts, right? Elite soccer playing that they play. And my son gets off the field and both my husband and I are like, what in the heck is he doing here? And we're like, he looks like he doesn't even know how to run, let alone play soccer. Like, what is he doing out there? And he comes off and he says, well, I don't want to be a soccer player anymore. He was in like fourth grade, fifth grade. We're like, no, like, do tell. And he's like, no, I want to be a Taekwondo guy. Like, okay, then go talk to the coach, let him know your situation, which he did. And the guy said, you know what? I really respect that. Go for it. And then he played rec soccer and learned that he wasn't really a taekwondo guy and ended up trying out again. And I was like, it was such a great experience for our whole family, even to say, like, you can literally stop midstream and still go back. There's no risk or there's no opportunity that's not going to be yours if you want it.
Mm, mm.
So bird launching, we relate to bird launching.
You know, okay, so that makes me think we're both in a similar situation where our kids are this Gen Z.
Hmm.
And I don't know about you, but I hear so many things about, Gen Z kids these days, all that kind of stuff. And it's really irritating because I'm like, you're writing off my kids before they've even gotten to work or even
Yeah.
before they've, whatever. And it's not just my kids, it's their friends. It's the people,
Yeah.
I care about these young people. And I I'm wondering, like when you hear that sort of thing, what message do you want to send to the leaders in the work world, in the military, in wherever, you have an opportunity to influence? What do you want to say to people welcoming Gen Z into the workforce?
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a great question. My daughter is a mechanical engineer. And so she is in a very male dominated field.
Go girl.
Yeah,
Love
exactly.
it.
And she's killing it, right? She's killing it. But what I notice about, I mean, so there's some things that just because of my husband's career in the military, our kids sort of needed to learn in order to be comfortable, not because we felt like they had to know how to do this and perform, but they were often in situations where there were going to be senior leaders that were going to introduce themselves and talk to my kids and ask them questions. And we wanted them to be prepared, to be comfortable, to be able to say, you can say what you want, but somebody's going to ask you some questions. How do you want to respond? And, what would be comfortable for you to talk about, things like that. And so they learned to have these adult conversations a little earlier and it became more natural for them because also we would tell them, listen, if you don't want to talk, you can just say something to sort of excuse yourself and off you go. And so when we look at how they're integrating, they have been saying to us, they learned some lessons that they didn't know were important about how to communicate with human beings in general. And so when we're watching this whole thing unfold, and I'm Gen X, right, which is kind of just shut up and do your job. We were thinking if we have a Pop Tart and a garden hose, we're good to go. And so for here, I'm looking at like, what did we do for our kids that when I see this new generation, I coach a lot of people from this generation. I got to be careful not to call them kids because they're
Yeah.
like my kids, right? And I notice that they are so aware of how not to hurt someone's feelings.
Hmm.
And they also, I mean, I think about my daughter went to college as, it was right at the beginning of the pandemic where everything was behind a mask and you had to have like your very tiny little pod of people where my freshman year, I was meeting every person I possibly could. And they have a hard time adjusting and understanding the social cues. And particularly social cues when all their friends that they've been, kind of growing up with were being aware of how not to hurt feelings. And the Gen Xers are like, just shut up and do your job. That's a different, that cue is not, it's not connecting. And so on the flip side of that, like Gen X, if they can be more aware of that fact that they really need a lot more communication, a lot more clarity, this Gen Z group is searching for ways to show up and they're intelligent. They're very in tune with the humanity of what all of this technology can bring to us and how to really live that balanced life is very important to them. And I think on the other side of it, they're seeing Gen X as this group of people who are, grinding and unhappy,
Hmm.
but that's what you do and you just do it and you have
Right.
to you have to buck up. And I think there's something to be learned from that too. Every feeling that you have is not a trauma. Life is sometimes uncomfortable and
Yes.
that's okay, and that's actually just the stretch, right? Like that's the introduction of you've lived your whole life surviving in your family, and I say surviving loosely, like we learn and we adapt even in the most comforting and loving families that there are. There's things that we're not going to learn how to do, and when we get out of that household and now we're exposed to everyone's family dynamic, even in the workforce, how do you figure out how to unravel all of these patterns that you've grown up with using and learn how to grow these new patterns that actually serve you much better? And if you're not prepared for that in terms of thought, right, as a student leaving, going into the workforce, young Gen Z, if you're not prepared to realize that this is the greatest time, it's going to feel wobbly and uncertain, and that's maybe not going to be comfortable for you because there's been a lot of things that you could control in your little environment, and now you're going to have to figure out how to get hit by the waves, basically, and then understand that you stand back up and it's all okay. This idea of perfectionism and you have to be the best and all of this that they've grown up with. And this, again, this isolated little bubble, internet connected us across the world, but also not really to ourselves anymore. We don't really know what human people look like. So I think that's, I don't know if I'm really answering the question, but I think that there's both sides can listen and learn, the side of the younger generation of workers, they could learn to be a little more, to gain some coping skills,
Yeah.
to learn a little bit more about resilience is really not just how you grit and bear through it, because I think that's what Gen X sometimes looks at it as. It's not just how you can grin and bear through it, it's how quickly you learn to bounce back from it. And that capacity is actually a whole different thing. Like, okay, now that you've learned some of these things where you get knocked down and you stand back up, well, now actually recognize, oh, I actually have capacity within me. I can be self-assured about certain things that maybe I wasn't before. It's not about being confident. It's about being self-assured, knowing that yourself, that you'll manage. That's how you build capacity. That's how you say, I think I can take more onto my plate. And on the reverse end, I think I have so, on the Gen X side, we have so much on our plate that we're like, I forget that I even need to I cope all the time and it's my habit and I get stuff done and I just want to break. When really we could say we actually have the capacity to have that juicy life and do all of these things if we just ask for more. So
oh my goodness,
that's my take.
I love it. Okay, so first of all, would you give us would you dive a little bit more into resilience and why it's not just like getting, like, what did you say? There was a dichotomy that you shared.
Yeah. I think we're experiencing as a society more stress than we've ever really handled before. And it's almost, to me, I think of it like a thermostat, right? It's almost like the thermostat just got reset at a higher level. And so we're expecting that to be the norm. Our whole bodies have adjusted to the fact that we carry this much stress. And that level just, I'm a physical therapist, I'm a somatic coach. Like, these are things that I didn't realize how many parallels there are to behavior versus our body. But your body is predisposing everything in your mindset. And so when our thermostat is that this level of stress or strain, I know how to manage it. I know how much energy it takes. I know when I might fall down. I know when I actually have to retreat. I know not to push past that, or else it's going to cost me something. When we start to level set here, then that's the comfort zone. And having this high level of stress as the comfort zone still does all the same things to our bodies. It still creates all that cortisol, robs us of all the energy that we need to actually have like creative conscious thought. And so when we're learning now in today's society, how do you cope with things? Coping is a survival skill. How do you get through it? And that is when we're supposed to feel stress and bring the levels up. If we accept that, if we don't pay attention, I should say, if we don't pay attention and say, this is not the only way that I can live my life, I could actually look at things, adjust things, take a different mindset to things, and interpret my stress differently. That's where we start to see our resilience build. When we get to that top of the stress cycle, and then we say, hold on a second, let me actually do what I need to do to care for myself. And I say care for myself, like, let me just adjust my nervous system. Let me just take that half a second, 30 seconds sometimes is all it takes. If we know some things to do to calm that part of our nervous system down, reset the thermostat, that's the resilience piece. How quickly do you rebound after you're experiencing stress? Once you can learn that up and down and make that pathway quicker, the drop down quicker, that's when you're going to start to feel like, oh, I can handle stress. I can handle more, because even if it gets too hot, I can lower the temperature quickly for myself. I have that within my capacity. And so that's that last frame, right? My capacity is greater because when it gets too hot, I can lower the temperature personally.
Yeah.
Despite the outside circumstances.
Right. Okay. So capacity is this big theme right now, because every company, every government entity is saying we have to be able to do more individually. Like you have fewer people around you helping out. There's
Yeah.
more to do. There's more to learn because we don't even know what we have to learn yet.
Yeah.
But we need more from you. And there's so much expectation to build capacity. So I love the resilience piece of this. What else do you think builds capacity? You know,
Oh goodness. Yes, yes, yes. I love this question. And how much time do we have? Like 12
I know,
days?
keep going. Just do it.
Right. It's so fascinating to me. What I notice in my clients that I work with right now, and I work with a pretty broad range right now of clients, all different industries and different size companies and individuals versus teams. There is, I personally think, where do you start? And I'm like, you mean I'm fast, fun, get the job done, right? Like I want it to be the quickest way from A to B. I don't want all the extra stuff. I just want, like, where can we start and have a small hinge that swings a big door? I personally think what we need to focus in on to build capacity is our language. I think we are, in a habit, everybody's in the habit, every human is in a habit of telling ourselves a story about what's happening outside of the world. And it may or may not be what's actually happening. Because let's face it, our brain lives in a black box inside of our head, and only access that it has is our senses and our body, which is under stress most of the time because we haven't figured out how to calm it down. And so when we're looking at how do we start, I think, the idea of emotional intelligence in terms of how do you actually interpret your emotions. And when you're interpreting your emotions, are you literally just feeling them and letting them show up, move through you, give you information, and move on? Or are you doing like that two-step process of the emotion shows up and then you make up a story about it, but then you follow the story about it, and then you make it about the story, and then you make it about the emotion and how the emotion is part of the story. Like, it's all of this down that rabbit hole of, well, because I feel bad, you're a problem for me, or because I feel bad, these circumstances aren't right for me, and because I feel bad, I need to retreat, versus looking at it and saying, because I feel bad, somewhere here, there's an opportunity. Somewhere here, I'm attached to something that may or may not be serving me.
I
That's
think that that is so important because there's such a temptation, right? Especially right now, I feel to just like if like you said, if it feels bad or if it seems to offend or
Mhm.
whatever, it's cut off.
Yeah,
And that only perpetuates, I think, this isolation that we feel.
exactly. Exactly.
We
We
have
put
to
ourselves
figure
in a
out how
bubble.
to work it out together. We have to figure out
Exactly.
how to work it out together
Exactly.
because there's just too much at stake for
Yeah.
humanity to feel like we have to, like, I don't know, be all high and mighty about protecting who, yes, there's stuff
Yeah.
to protect. That's the hard part, is that there
Yeah.
are things to protect. And there are times when some people should be cut off from our
Right.
existence.
Right. Right.
So I
And that's
want,
where I feel it sorry. I feel like we're exactly there, right? We're learning to say, I think, our generation of Gen Xers, maybe my generation of Gen Xers is saying, maybe even feelings are important. We're teaching our kids that feelings are important, feelings are important, don't hurt feelings, and blah, 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 blah. But now we've gotten this side of the equation to come forward and say, but my feelings have to be protected. And that creates that isolating wall. When I feel this way, I need to retreat and protect my mental health, protect my well-being, like all these things, which is true. Like, we do have to learn that side of the equation. More of the people in my side of the generation, I feel like, are saying, oh yeah, right, I do have to pay attention to my mental health and my well-being, or like, it's time for me to start doing that. And so I think that when we look at it and say we have to protect our feelings or protect ourselves, there's value to that. We have to be able to notice, oh, something about this doesn't work for me. And then double check it, like reality check it to, well, is the response that I'm having actually equivalent to the circumstances around me? Am I really in danger? Like, what is really at risk for me here? Is it just that my feelings are going to get hurt, or actually is my livelihood at stake? And even when I'm thinking, yeah, I might lose my job, what's the likelihood that you're going to lose your job? And is there even anything that you could do about it? Right? You might lose your job. So have a plan B. Get your resume ready. Be prepared for what you can in the moment versus seeing that threat and retreating over and over and over again, because it totally isolates us. And I love that you said, we go into protection mode, and that's a nervous system response, right? We're in partner mode or protection mode. We have three zones basically in the nervous system. We're either surviving, which literally we're like, we just need to keep ourselves alive. We're coping, or we're thriving. And that line between cope and thrive is the tricky one. It's underneath that line, we're protecting, right? It's actually, we're even sometimes when we feel like we're helping someone else, it's depleting. It's a transactional type of a thing. We're helping someone else. Eventually, we're going to have to fill our own tank. But if we can figure out, and a lot of this has to do with how you unwind all the things that you believe about yourself. But if we can figure out that when I feel that depletion, that's not the time to retreat and fall backwards and say, I better protect all of my own resources because what happens if it doesn't work out? Versus the thought of, oh, my resources are getting depleted. There's resources all around me. There are people all around me. If I partner over here, I can take half the work and share it. Or I can take this idea and I can share this idea. And now we have two candles lit, making a brighter light, like more illumination, more ideas. Well, what do you see that I don't see? That partnership is really what builds capacity. We build capacity through others, and that's just human beings. We're social creatures. If we want to build capacity, we need to see outside perspectives on what we see.
Yeah.
That's the shift for me.
There's so much wisdom in that. And I think both, as we're talking about the Gen Z, Gen X kind of mix here, because that's obviously what I am as well, Gen X. It does seem like we both need to hear about this. We both need to know how to allow our, like, draw boundaries in relationships that make sense, but aren't just so self-protective that we become isolating. And yet at the same time, realize that we have what it takes to get through.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the hardest things for kids to learn. We know that kids that are in junior high, for example, what they are dealing with is so severe to them. And a lot of kids are thinking about suicide, considering suicide, attempting suicide. It's not just something they need to get over.
Yeah.
But I think that it's easy for us when we're saying that things need to be right and perfect and bust through and all this kind of stuff. I don't know, like, what am I trying to say? I feel like I'm a mess. I'm going to cut some of that out, but
you're not sounding like a mess. I think it's all very true.
Yeah, like I know that these kids need to know that they have what it takes. And part of what Gen X has to do is be able to let them do it and find themselves and find out what they can do. That's one of the reasons why I love how we started this conversation with the bird launching.
Yeah.
That this idea of letting them experience the falling out of the nest, letting them find their wings, letting them figure out what they're going to do when something happens, not instead of coaching them through it and giving them the step-by-step that we've figured out,
right? Allowing
them to figure these things out. And I think that applies directly to the workplace.
Yeah.
Because they are feeling like at least a number of people that I know and have talked to are feeling like they need to get it right the first time.
Yes, 100%, especially in Gen Z. Yeah. And I think even in Gen X, they don't want to waste their time doing it the wrong way. Like Gen X is looking at, I just don't have the energy to do more than what I have to do.
Yes.
And Gen Z is saying, I don't want to be perceived as unvaluable, or, just the embarrassment of not being who I think I am is devastating for them oftentimes. It's such a great point that you're bringing in. I think when, as the parents of these Gen Zers, from my perspective, and for as the coach who coaches a lot of Gen Xers, I think there's value for this older generation of folks and everyone in between, honestly. I'm not skipping the millennials, not trying to leave them out, but um, we have to understand our own relationship to control. Like, I think a lot of Gen
Yes.
X people grew up needing to control what was going on in their household. And it sneaks in, right? Like, even when we're like, no, I can let go of that now. Except for, let me tell you what I know. Let me share my wisdom. Let me
I
do all, right,
figured it
all of these
out.
things. I
I
figured it
figured it
out.
out. So let me
Let me
show you.
please tell everybody else how to make life easier. And I think that's our good intention
Yes.
that gets in the way of, now you have to figure it out. And I think part of the question, maybe as a leader, even in speaking with, and I coach a lot of people around this, doesn't matter where you are, when we're, again, it comes back to that idea of above the line. Like, how do you partner to get better results? And a lot of times people think, how many times have you heard too, like, I don't have the time, I don't have the time to go through it, I don't have the time to walk through it. I don't have the time, for me, just becomes code for, I just want to keep it in control. I don't want you to take anything offline that I'm not expecting, so let me just tell you exactly what I want. And so in the middle of that, the switch is, listen, you have to look for the win-win, right? That above the line win-win, where we're saying, look, here's what would work best for me. I want to know, before we do anything, what would work best for you? Because now you're both open to, well, what would work best for me is this. So, and then from that point, you have options. You can either say, all right, well, I'll compromise and sacrifice something of mine. You compromise and sacrifice something of yours. Neither one of us ends up happy, but we get the job done. And sometimes we need to do that when time is really too scarce. Um, but the other option is to say, well, hang on a second. If this is what's really important to you and this is what's really important to me, is there a way that we haven't thought of yet that we can actually get all of those needs met? Like, imagine that. If we could get all of those needs met, that concept, here's what would work for me, gives us, the nervous system, a lot of support. It says, let me identify for a second what's important to me. Let me also identify, in the context of what I have going on, if I say yes, I might be able to say yes if X, Y, or Z happens. I might need to say no. But if I say no, I might be able to say no, but I might be able to do this, right? Like, it gives us that pause that really is so critical to capacity and resilience, to say, how does my needs still get met despite the circumstances? And how am I going to do it? By asking the partner across from me, what do they have that they can put on the table? What's their win? Instead of paying attention to how do we get all of these ducks to line up, pick the ducks that are the most important and then line them up, right? I think we spend a lot of time feeling like we're juggling too many balls. And one of the greatest questions I was ever asked personally was, what if all the balls were on the floor and you had to pick one up? Where would you start? And I think that's a great way to start with a conversation in partnership with someone else.
So I think that the temptation tends to be that I want things to work out. So we're talking from the Gen X standpoint
Sure.
right now. I want things to work out. I've already figured this out. I need it to go the way that I've planned. I know how to make it work.
Yeah.
But what do we lose when we tell people what to do instead of
Sure.
inviting them in on the process of figuring out what to do and problem
Yeah.
solving together, like you're talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great question. And I think I always like to start from, what do we gain? Like, why are we so attached to telling people what to do, is really a great place to start first. And there's real reasons why we want to tell them what to do. Number one, we feel good about it because we are sharing wisdom. We don't want anybody to work harder, right? So we're trying to do right. So that comes from a very heart-centered place. Number two, we're gaining the control. We're saying, I want you to do it like this. Now I've just set the expectation for both of us moving along, right? So we set that expectation. We sort of can now put our attention in other places, which gives us energy back, right? What we lose, I mean, those are the big ones. There's lots of things that we probably gain, but what we lose is the creativity, the innovation, the idea. Like, I can't even tell you, just in my own family, we were packing the car to go. I think we were packing the car to go bring my daughter to college. And my husband and I are like two total opposites about how we do anything, literally. It's amazing that we're still together after, 30 years. But as we were packing, like the two of us could not see what the other one was trying to say. And I finally turned to my son, who was, I think, like, I don't even know, 16 at the time, 15. And I said, Jake, we can't figure out how to pack this car. I mean, it was such a mundane thing. It was so silly. Probably the stress of bringing my daughter to college, all those things getting in the way, right? Our pressure comes in. We start to try to control. I want my way to win. You want your way to win. I said, and he's a very different thinker from both of us, which is great, right? Like, sort of this observer. And I said, how would you pack the car if you could just do it? And he, in like 12 seconds, was like, oh, like this. And both my husband and I stood next to him. We were like, thank you. And off we went, right? Like, why didn't we see it? Because we're under stress, because we're trying to stay in control of not even necessarily the car itself, trying to stay in control of our emotions, trying to stay in control of what's important to us, trying to stay in control, like, of all the things, like we're trying to control the future of what's going to happen. And the more certainty that we can build when we feel uncertain, we think the safer we feel. But we're really not creating certainty. We're just certain that we're trying to control something, which is usually pretty frustrating. If we can get partnership, what we lose is that outside perspective of, well, what would work for me is this. Even being open to that, you still get to choose. That really doesn't work for me. Or part of what you said works for me really well, and part of it really doesn't. Like, that new idea is what we lose. And that's where that whole innovation and creativity and the pressure, we lose the pressure. I mean, you could say we lose it in a good way and a bad way, maybe, right? Like, when we share that information, just the option of saying, I don't actually know what to do right now entirely. I maybe have some ideas, but I'm open to other ideas. That's that perspective of being seen and understood is what's critical for human connection. And that's how we regulate our nervous systems. I mean, just to add a little bit in about that, we do best, babies, even when they meet their parents, whoever they are, they co-regulate their nervous system. A nervous parent, you start to see the nervous baby, a nervous baby, you start to see the nervous parent. Like, it kind of goes both ways. And so we co-regulate our nervous system. If you can find, it doesn't matter who's got that higher level, that more abundant level of energy in the moment, but we bring each other to it, or we bring each other down into it. And so noticing the moment of pause, zooming out to the partnership to say, I'm overwhelmed. Now, let me ask you, what do you see? We don't have to commit to anything more than that. What do you see in this? It's what, leaders all the time, when they get into the new suites or whatever, and think they have to have all the answers, and it just drives everybody crazy, including them. Like, why not see what you have as resources in the room, perspectives? You still get to make the authoritative decision at the end. We all do. Am I going to follow that leader even? Like, we all get to make that decision at the end, but we have to figure out how to create that option in order to have it.
I hear people say sometimes that, but if I open up the conversation, then I'm opening up myself to having to hear that they're upset with me if I don't take on their idea, or that they are, I have to hear more. I have to deal with more because I've opened up the conversation, because it's freaking messy.
Can be.
Yeah. Speak to that.
Yeah. I mean, isn't it so interesting? Like, if we look about it, what are they really afraid of? If you're, when you're say, I don't want to deal with hearing that there's a mess, because we're afraid that we don't have the capacity to deal with it.
Yeah.
We're afraid, right?
Totally.
If there's a mess, and especially if I've just said, you need to do steps A to Z, and then there's a mess at Z, Nobody wants to hear that. If I've just told you do A to Z, nobody wants to hear I was wrong all along, right? Like I always say fail fast, and it's like out there everywhere. And it's such a weird concept for people who are feeling that anxiety of, but I don't want to be a failure, right? It's sort of the idea of experiment early, ask questions, find the curiosity. And here's what I see, A to Z. I could map it out and say, I think that's the best possible way. There's a concept called red teaming, military concept called red teaming. Okay, here's what I see, A to Z. This is, if I had my ideal plan, this is what it would be. Somebody knock it down for me. Show me where the holes are, please. If we can get into a habit of saying, I don't have all the answers, I have great ideas though. Why wouldn't somebody else also have great ideas? If there's a mess, maybe I do want to know about it sooner versus later. It's when we're saying at the later stage there's a mess that we start to say, but I've already, here's where like it's the worst Achilles heel. I've already put all this energy in.
Mm-hmm.
I've already spent all this time. I've already built my reputation to be the one in charge of all this. I've already become the person who is the leader of this. Now I'm going to say, undo it, right? That's a hard thing to deal with. And that's exactly what we're talking about in coaching 100% of the time. Like, you became this person. Are you happy with it? Who do you have to become now that you're realizing there's a mess at Z? How do you need to change your mindset? What do you need to be able to deal with? And can you deal with it earlier in the next alphabet? Right? Like, now that you've learned this one time that there's a mess, well, can you start differently next time? It's that reflection point of noticing, oh, I did A to Z pretty well. It just didn't turn out the way that I really wanted it to.
Yeah.
If I include other perspectives, maybe I get a different result.
Yeah.
Right? Einstein's quote, do the same thing. I'm going to misquote it, but if you do the same thing, expect the same result.
Right. And I'm sure there's a place and time for, I don't want to deal with it right now. I mean, that's natural. I'm sure that there's times when that's just the way it is. But leaders raise leaders. And if we're not giving people the opportunity to learn from us on how we're going to tackle a problem together, then they're not going to know how to do that. Or, if we're giving off this, if we're projecting this, I've already got it figured out, then that's why Gen Z is coming up saying, I need to have it figured out the first time. And if I don't, then they're carrying all this anxiety because they don't know it yet, or they didn't get it right the first time.
Right.
And so giving people that space to explore and with us, I mean, that is the heart of mentorship right there too. I think that's another thing that we lose is the opportunity to really build into the generations coming behind us. If we're not willing to let it get messy, if we're not willing to, or not wanting to, bring them in on the process.
Yeah. Well, it's like teaching your kids to eat at the table, right? Like, if you hand them a spoon and their food in front of them and they're small, it's ending up all over the floor. And if you're not willing to clean that up time and time again, or at least choose your food battles, right? Like, maybe you give them the Cheerios that when they fall on the floor, you don't have to mop or something afterwards, right? Versus giving them the mashed potatoes that are going to end up in the curtains, like whatever it is that you let them figure out how to manipulate and use in the situation, right? It's the same sort of thing. I think we need to redefine. I think mentorship used to be an idea that traditionally you would think like you have a designated mentor that spends a designated amount of time and who has another hour to take off their calendar. Nobody has that. I think if we shift and think about it in terms of mentorship is actually something that happens on the fly all the time. That's where we start to notice that mentorship is really about looking at what wisdoms does everyone have. And this works for the reverse too. When Gen Z is coming onto the scene and they're full of such great ideas and they're so excited about what they're doing and they're so intelligent, like they really are I'm so interested in this whole young generation of workers right now, new generation of workers. They have all these ideas. And I think what I'm noticing is that they are feeling squashed by people who are leading them and saying, we don't have time to explore all of this right now. Great idea. But, and I think there's strategies, first of all, of how to present ideas from that side of things. And I think it's all the same pattern though, right? Like when somebody with a new idea comes into your office and says, listen, this is about strategic thinking, by the way, which is a skill that I probably develop most with all of my clients. How do you think more strategically? What does your boss's boss think about each night? And when you come in and you say, here's what I'm noticing, why would that be relevant to your boss's boss, not just your own, right? And so looking at it and saying, listen, here's what I understand so far about our whole situation. Here's what I'm observing about from my seat in this situation. Here's the idea that I see. And I don't, I'm curious, we're not doing that, but this is the idea that I see. What am I missing? Every time you can say the same, no matter if you're floating up or down the stream, it doesn't matter. Here's what I understand about the situation. It gives your leader the chance to understand what you already see. Like, this is how I'm perceiving it. Maybe I'm off in that moment. Oh, well, no wonder why. If your leader can say to you, no wonder why, if you're seeing it that way, of course, this seems like a solution. Let me add or subtract something from what you understand. So now you have a clearer vision, right? So it's immediate in the minute of saying, here's how we clarify our vision together for this company. Here's what I'm observing. I'm identifying a problem or a gap or an opportunity. Maybe my eyes are not on that as the leader because I have my eyes on 1,000 other things. You're bringing it to my attention. It might be letter Z on the alphabet, or it might be something urgent. Either way, having that communication, where does this fall in the bigger picture, right? Bringing a solution now in the middle of whatever your leader is doing or your employee, they don't have to stop and say, wait, what do you want me to figure out for you? Which will be oftentimes a person who is busy. That will be what they think first. This is some other problem that I have to figure out a solution for.
Yes.
And I don't have time for this right now because I'm still in the middle of the stream of things that I have. So when you can come and say, here's what I understand, here's where I see the gap, here's what I think about a solution, here's how it would lay out. What could I be missing? Am I missing something? What's your, experienced perspective on it? Whether that person is brand new in the job or has the CEO of the company has been around for years and years and years. What's the perspective that I might be missing? That pattern works no matter which direction you go. And that's how we share ideas. And it happens mentorship in the moment, immediate. Well, your vision is spot on, or it's off in these areas. Let's clarify this. Or maybe I don't even know. Like, that's how I see it too, but maybe we both have questions now. But I don't have to solve it right now.
This is such a great conversation. I just think that this is a topic that is so relevant and important. And I have one more question for you on this topic. When you have had mentors in the past, is there anything in particular that they have done that you realize that you want to pass on or that you want to do for others?
Oh, yes. So, I'm a physical therapist, and physical therapy in my life, at least, and I believe in most physical therapy lives, is very heavy mentorship. It's very heavy instruction, pass on knowledge, pass on information. And so I've had actually amazing mentorship in my entire career. It's actually the thing that I've sought out the most, and I moved around a bunch with my husband's Coast Guard job. And so I've had amazing mentorship, and I can tell you every time, my best mentors, their approach would be something like this, right? I would understand I'm frustrated, I don't know what I want to do here. Or I'm struggling, right? That's always what I'm struggling and I want to understand more about X, Y, or Z, or I don't even know what I need to know. Like sometimes that was it as the person who's being mentored. And when I would bring a case to my mentor and I would say, here's what, their questions, typically her questions in the best mentorship situations were, well, what do you see? Like, tell me what you're observing. That was the first piece, because I think to make the answer shorter, the best mentorship I ever had always consistently taught me how to think differently. Always, every single time. If I'm looking at a case this way, and I'm thinking it's X, Y, and Z. That was always the first step in that process for me. Hey, I'm looking at this problem. Here's what I've tried, or here's what I think it is. Here's what I've tried. Here's where I'm still hitting a wall. And in that moment, as a mentor, it's very tempting to say, well, you did it wrong, or here's what you could do, or what, it's very tempting to jump in and impart that information. And the best mentors I ever had would say to me, well, tell me how you came to that conclusion. And then they would ask me another question. Well, what else did you consider? Okay, so beyond that, what else might you have considered? Right? They would actually force me to think harder to solve my own. And I mean, we called it, one of my favorite clinics, we called it, it's the 1 minute preceptor. It's actually a medical pathway, but it's the same thing. It's saying, you don't give them the answer. You say, well, how are you thinking about it? What is your process? Examine it. Are you getting all the pieces that you need? Have you talked to the people or done the research that you need to? Have you considered these other outside factors that it could be? It's asking, and it literally only takes 5 minutes to do it, but it sets you up. And I used to call my one mentor my skill sergeant, because every time she would kick me back to the curb and say, have you thought about this yet? Have you thought about this yet? Have you thought about this yet? And then she'd say, go back. And then when you've thought about it, come back and tell me. Don't waste the time now until you've thought about these things, until eventually I was like, oh, now I get the pattern of here's how I think, to make sure I include all of these things. Now, when I come there, we're having a very curious conversation. When I always got to the point of, her name was Karen, when I would get to the point of she looking at me and saying, oh, that's interesting, I knew it was something worth learning at that point, because she was brilliant and had every answer she could have told me. But if I had gotten to that point of, oh, that's interesting, now we're both learning. And that was always the best every time.
Mm.
That's the only thing I could say.
Really cool.
Teach people how to think.
Yeah.
If you're going to be in a mentorship role.
So good. How can people find you in your company?
The easiest way, I'm like such a low digital profile type of person. The easiest way to find me is just to email me, quite frankly, or you can hop on. There's a link, I believe, that you have for just to set up a session. I work with teams and leaders. I work with individuals at all levels, basically, and I work with big organizations too. So it's set up a session, a strategy session. They're complimentary. Basically, I'll learn what's going on for you, and you can learn what I might be able to offer.
Cool. And we'll put that in the show notes. Last question for this conversation here. Based on what we were talking about today, what challenge do you want to leave us with that will help us shape the future?
Oh my goodness. I think the challenge is to learn to trust our capacity. That's the big challenge. Like learn, I recently started swapping the word confidence for self-assuredness.
Yeah.
Because confidence to me is what we gain after we've done something. Oftentimes we're confident because of our experience. And before we have the experience, what are we left with? But if we can come to the experience with a sense of self-assuredness that I know at least myself this far, so I'm willing to try it, right? I'm 80% certain I probably can do it. And I only need enough confidence then to take the step, right? I'm committed. If I'm 100% committed, 80% sure, then I only need enough confidence to try.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so fun.